Hey, uh, thanks for tuning in. No one's here quite yet, but just in case someone's listening to this a little bit later, I really do appreciate you taking the time to even give the show the opportunity to be seen. Before we get started, just give a little bit of background about myself, just in case this is your first time watching. Representing Three Pillars Fitness. I personally, John Waters, have been in the fitness game for about 5 years now. In that time, I've amassed a certain amount of knowledge as far as the do's and don'ts, excuse me, and some of the other pitfalls that newbies and people fresh to training usually go through when they go without the guided experience of someone who's more knowledgeable than they are. And so today's show is going to be directed at hopefully addressing and maybe even preventing you from making some of those mistakes. We'll wait a couple more seconds to give anyone who may be interested the opportunity to chime in and let us know they're here, and then we'll go ahead and get things started. If you're watching this show and you're someone who usually watches on a regular basis, I do appreciate you. Last week was a little bit of a different kind of week for me. Some things came up last minute. And so instead of going live, I went ahead and ran a video from a previous time I recorded with someone else. So I hope you guys got something out of that. If you're watching from the Facebook group, thanks for tuning in. I may not be able to see your comments if you don't allow StreamYard to have permission to show your name. All right, but I still do appreciate it. If you're watching from my homepage, thanks for stopping by. If you're watching from the Three Pillars actual business page, I highly appreciate you. All right, we'll wait a couple more seconds. As usual, my goal is to not hold you guys up very long. I know it's kind of late. I know I myself have to get up around 3 o'clock to get ready for the day. And so hopefully I provide some good info. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask and we'll just go from there. All right, awesome. So today's show is going to be about some of the myths that surround strength training. Prior to getting into training, I myself had an extreme interest in Arnold Schwarzenegger because that was all I really understood about training. And I thought that, everyone who lifted got big and buff. I, however, did not take that same road. I started strength training the first time when I was in high school with a group of friends. We used to go to Gold's Gym. I grew up in Cincinnati. I went to high school in Western Hills, and there was a Gold's Gym down the street. And that didn't last very long. I want to say I maybe had the membership for like a month or so. And then life happened, and I kind of fell off of that bandwagon. But some of the myths that you may have heard about, I know that I certainly did during my earlier days. We're going to address those today. All right, so let's first off start off talking about bro science. So, bro science isn't as scientific as hopefully you're not led to believe by the terminology. It really is just the average person's idea of what fitness should be based off what they've seen in the gym. And sometimes it's not really based off of any kind of scientific information at all. It's just someone may have gotten lucky and got some kind of results and they felt that, this should be the new rule. And someone else who was just as inexperienced just so happened to see them doing it. And before you know it, it's a phenomenon where everyone thinks this is the way to go. And that's just not always the case, which kind of leads us to how do some of these myths get started? Well, it really does start with bro science. All right. And so the reason that we're actually having this conversation today is I was recently talking to someone on Facebook who's beginning their at home training program. And they were talking about some things that I thought had already been massaged as far as being taken out of the population and, being demystified. They mentioned the idea of muscle confusion. All right. So some of you may not be aware of muscle confusion. You may not have even heard about it, which could be a good thing. Muscle confusion is pretty much the idea that when you train your muscles, they somehow, if you want to say, get bored or they get used to what you're doing so rapidly that you need to come up with something different every single time you train in order to stimulate them in a new way. And I searched and searched, and I did not find anything that backed this idea up. In fact, everything that I found had the word myth in there. So you definitely want to stay away from this idea. However, I won't say that it's an all around bad idea. Its application is just a little bit thrown off. And so, yes, every time you train, you should be changing something. However, that may not necessarily be the actual exercises you're doing. How can you ever master something if you're always doing something different? The goal isn't to go in there and be the most creative person in the gym or be the most creative person in your home workouts. It's to be the most effective person. And in the personal training world, we have a couple principles that we go by. And one of them is really helpful to avoid making this pitfall. It's called the overload principle. And so, as I mentioned a couple of seconds ago, the idea that you do want to, in fact, change something when you're training every single time, but it doesn't have to be changing the exercises. What you want to instead try to focus on is manipulating the weight. If you feel that what you're doing is becoming a little too easy, maybe time to adjust the weight, maybe increase it. Before you even think about increasing the weight, though, maybe you want to look at increasing the repetitions or maybe adjusting the intensity in which you're training with. All right. So it should definitely be some kind of process that you're approaching this with. But again, the goal isn't to change up the exercises, it's to overload the muscles enough that they are forced to change or adapt to what you're doing so that you therefore can come back and adjust the weight and or intensity in which you're training. And that's how you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck and your time in training. All right. And so another myth that I've heard mostly from women, usually men don't come to me with this, is they're more afraid that if they start lifting weights that they'll, turn into bodybuilders. And they usually say, I don't want to look like him or her. And there's usually some kind of crazy confusion about this. Um, I want to say that the chances of you blowing up and becoming the next, model for a freaking, bodybuilding magazine is very slim. It's very, very slim. It takes an awesome amount of dedication and hard work to get to that point that your average person coming straight off the couch may not possess quite yet. All right. So I wouldn't be so concerned about, getting bulky as I would be concerned about building strength. And strength is something that everyone can benefit from achieving, no matter what your sport is, no matter how old you are. There are benefits going up and down the spectrum of age and sexual preferences as far as what you should be doing to make sure that you're better off in the long run. All right. So, for instance, most of you may know this, some of you may not, but for women in particularly, as they persist and continue to get older, they become more at risk for developing osteoporosis. All right, and so one of the best ways you can do to combat that is actually getting involved in a strength training program. All right, let's say that maybe that's too broad of an idea. Maybe your thing that you'd like to do for leisure is running, or maybe you're actually a runner, a marathon runner, or maybe a sprinter. Well, you don't necessarily get away from strength training either. There are some benefits that apply to make you a more efficient runner, increasing your stamina and building your strength, which in the long run will make you better at what you do. All right. So avoiding strength training because you're afraid of getting bulky isn't necessarily the way you want to go. All right. We actually have a question. Let's go ahead and check that out real quick. All right. Myth two was a reason why I was hesitant for weight training before I started. Yeah, and I mean, whoever you are, you're not alone. Like I mentioned before, there are a lot of people who don't want to train, at least not train intensely, because they fear that they may, bulk up. And let me take a step back when I talk about training. I'm not just talking about the idea of going into the gym and picking up a couple 5 pounds. I'm talking about the idea of, challenging yourself and each time you go in, up in the ante a little bit more. And so maybe, you end up curling 25 pounds or squatting 100 pounds, whatever is going to be significant for you. That goal shouldn't be out of reach for you because you fear the idea that you may become bulky. If anything, you'll become stronger and better for it. So don't dodge that. All right. Getting back on topic. Another thing I've heard, squats are bad for me. All right. And so it doesn't have to be squats that we're talking about. It can be any exercise. I mean, people have all kinds of reasons as to why they don't train. And before I go any further with this conversation, I want to say that if you have medical reasons or, you have some kind of past injury that actually really does prohibit you from training, I'm not talking to you right now. I'm talking to the person who doesn't squat because yes, their knees may hurt when they do squats and they may have some discomfort in their shoulders or their elbows when they do something, but that's not necessarily caused because you're lifting weights. What you really should start focusing on is how you're lifting weights. All right. And so brilliance in the basics. As much as I would love to take claim for this saying, it is not mine. I picked it up when I was in Kings Bay, Georgia. We had a Lieutenant Colonel. I can't remember his name right now, but he used to use this phrase all the time, talking about being brilliant in the basics. And back then, what he was really referring to was making sure that, as specialized as our skills were, it didn't hurt to review the things that got you there. All right. And so tonight, when I'm talking about this idea, what I'm referring to is, going into your squats, you don't necessarily have to go in there and pick up the heaviest thing, whether that be your squats, your bench press, whatever the exercise is. What you first need to do is get an understanding. All right. And so that's going to require you to actually maybe put aside your ego and ask for help. And the good thing about being alive in today's time is that you don't necessarily have to open your mouth and ask anyone for anything. What you really could do is do your own research. All right. So that could be done in a number of ways by checking out YouTube, by going to Instagram. There are a lot of knowledgeable people out there who are putting out great content, and they will be more than happy to have a conversation with you if you're interested. Especially if you're asking for help. Not many people ask for help these days. Everyone just wants to do it themselves and hope for the best. But I want to encourage you to not take that road. Put your pride to the side and actually get out there and look around and see what's what. And don't take the first thing you hear as gold. Even as you listen to me and you tune in tonight or whenever it is you're watching, if anything I say doesn't quite sit well with you, go do your own research. I'm not above being challenged. So if you find something that I say to not fit quite with what you heard last, bring it up. I'll be more than happy to discuss it with you. And that can be said for any fitness enthusiast who really is about this life. They won't be uncomfortable talking about these things with you. All right. So that's pretty much the big three things that I want to hit on. Mostly because, like I said, they're pretty much the most reoccurring topics that I've heard of, even though it has been a while, like I said before, since I heard the muscle confusion one. All right. And so, just again, to do a quick recap for you guys, if there are no questions, muscle confusion, myth. Avoid that idea. Instead, you want to look into the overload principle. All right. So that's where you're going to actually be able to increase the amount of weight you can pull and the efficiency and movements. Those are the things you want to really focus on. All right. And along with that, I want to remind you to put your ego to the side. Don't go in there trying to pick up the heaviest weight, or if you're working out at home, don't overwork yourself. Come up with an intelligent plan and execute on that one. All right. And if you're new to training, especially to my women audience, don't be afraid of getting too bulky. Realize that it's going to take a lot of work for you to get to that status. If anything, you'll just become more strong and more confident. And that's really what this is all about. I mean, outside of the obvious functional abilities that occur with, persistent effort, but becoming more confident, more able to live life the way you want to live it. So think about that, not so much the bulk. And like I said before, training has benefits for everyone. All right. And I don't really think that I need to beat up on the squats. We already talked about that. I will, however, give a couple seconds for questions. All right. It's not really a bad thing if there are no questions for today. Tonight's topic was pretty straightforward. Uh, if you think of anything when I get off, like I said earlier, hit me up. You can reach me on Facebook, Instagram, whatever the case may be. I'm always down to talk about fitness. But before I get out of here, I'm going to talk about this quite a few times between now and next Thursday. I am extremely excited to bring this guy on that's coming to the show next Thursday. He is a physical therapist. And not only that, this guy has really been in the business and making waves. He's been active for 25 years, so there's a plethora of knowledge inside this man's head, and I am extremely excited and honored to have him come on. All right, I'll fill you guys a little bit more. I'll fill you guys in a little bit more about that as the days progress. But yeah, I'm extremely excited for that. If you guys enjoyed this video, please go ahead and go check out the YouTube channel. There are several others, and let me know what you think. Drop a comment, subscribe, like, and that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. I really do appreciate you guys jumping on. I know it was kind of last minute when me saying I was coming on this week. I don't know, last week I kind of fell off, but I'm back and things are going to be a little different. And obviously, I'm hoping that they get better. In the meantime, it looks like there are no questions, and I'm not a big fan of doing nothing for no reason. So thank you for tuning in. Hope you guys have a great night and have a great week. And as always, keep pushing. Greatness awaits.